Morning everyone, hello. Welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna, the 133rd episode, Teachers. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn, I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service. And the Highland Archive Service has 4 archive centres across the Highlands of Scotland, in Inverness, Wick, Portree and Fort William. This series of Learn with Lorna talks is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of talks. But if you're able to donate towards our work, and again, as I often say, I know many of you haven't, thank you for that, because it really does make a difference to what we do. So, Learn with Lorna 133, the third one of 2023, and the third year of having Learn with Lorna episodes, which is quite extraordinary to me because it just seems like not that long ago since we started, so quite amazing. This month we are looking at the theme of in-living memory across our social media channels. It's been such a popular theme, so I hope you've enjoyed seeing it. Things that people remember, buildings and people and so on. And so I've looked at Ian Sutherland collection held at Nucleus and the Tommy McPherson collection held at Hark. But this week I'm going to look at a much more general subject rather than one specific person. A general subject because I thought it would be something that everyone could identify with and everyone would have memories of, and that's the subject of teachers. We all know, I think, that teachers can be hugely influential in children's lives, and often that influence carries on into adulthood. I know that I have spoken before here and in other places about how important my history teacher David Taylor was in encouraging me and kind of firing a love of history in me, and also in countless other people who attended Kingussie High School. And it was funny, I've maybe told this story before, but it was funny one day when I was speaking to a class of about 30, 35, I don't know, second year students, talking to this class and hearing my own teacher, turning around and seeing my own history teacher standing behind me who'd come in to do some research. A moment of, please think I'm being okay. So teachers can have a huge impact on our lives, positive and negative. Please, if you've got any memories of specific teachers, please do put them in to the chat, because it's always really nice to see those. So what do our collections tell us about teachers, and where can you find references to teachers in our archives? It depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for a recent family member who trained as a teacher, or are you looking for an overview of education in a particular area? That really depends on what you're trying to find out. Also depends on what time period you're looking at. So starting relatively early, some of the earliest references to teachers that we have can be found in our church records and in our borough records. So I'm going to start with church. Religion and education have been intertwined for centuries, and you'll know that if you've listened to me over these 3 years, how interconnected religion and education have been. And many people in the past received their education either in a religious institution or thanks to the support of a religious institution. And our collections show the role that the Church of Scotland, and then from 1843 the Free Church of Scotland, particularly played in educating the children of the Highlands, with support of the heritors, that's the local landowners. Kirk session and presbytery records, so that's the kirk session is the local level of the church, the local elders of a church, and the presbytery, the court above that, at a more district level. Those records include details of the recruitment of teachers, teacher training and payment, and also the establishment, construction and running of the school buildings. I wanted to read to you an extract from the Presbytery of Abertarth that illustrates this. So this is written in our church records from the 1700s. It being represented to the presbytery by some of the gentlemen of the parish of Urquhart that they greatly stand in need of a charity school in the braes of that country, on account of the ignorance of the people, Popish priests are taking occasion to encroach upon that corner, as it is remote and discontiguous from the strath of the parish. The presbytery, considering the said representation, find their petition both just and reasonable, and therefore appoint the Reverend Master Alexander McBain minister of the gospel at Inverness, to write to the Honourable Society for Propagating Christian Knowledge in the name of this presbytery, craving that they would allow some funding for the settling of a charity school in the breeze of the said parish. So the community, part of the community has written to the presbytery, so the presbytery is overseeing different parish churches, and they've written to say there's a problem here because popish priests are encroaching upon us because of the ignorance of the people. And so they go on to say, the presbytery considering that Henry Urquhart, late schoolmaster at Urquhart, his present circumstances cannot allow him to maintain himself and his family, and upon trial they find him sufficiently qualified to teach a charity school, and therefore they're appointing the moderator to recommend the said Henry Urquhart to the minister and the gentlemen of the parish, in order to give him due encouragement and subsistence until they can obtain a commission for him to teach at that school and a salary to maintain him. So clear evidence there, not only of a school being set up, but also of a teacher being recruited, and that link between religion and education, that reference to the fact that they are setting up the school because of the ignorance of the people is allowing popish priests to encroach. Written in 1726, so we're in the midst of religious tensions and the Jacobite risings. And so you can see that the church there taking a role in educating people to promote what they see as the true religion. That extract there also included a reference to the fact that the presbytery, they're not single-handedly putting this into effect. They're going to approach the SSPCK, the Society for Propagating Christian Knowledge, to get assistance. The SSPCK was founded in 1709 to promote the education and civilization of Highland inhabitants, and you've heard me say that before. They set up schools and also recruited teachers. If you're interested in the SSPCK records, the originals are held at the National Records of Scotland, but we do hold some copies and some information in the Highland Archive Service as well. So that's church records. Another place you can find teachers discussed and mentioned prior to the 1872 Education Scotland Act is in borough minutes and the well-loved treasurer's accounts, well loved by me anyway. These references can be anything from teachers being put through their trials, so there's a reference to David Fraser in Inverness in 1723 being put through his teaching trials, or payments to teachers. Teachers generally in the grammar school, but also teachers of music, of dance and other subjects, which you might remember I spoke about a few weeks ago in the music, dance and drama episode. We can also find references to teachers within personal papers. So there are things like references. If there are any teachers listening, I mean, I'd imagine that you're in school at this time, but if there are any teachers listening subsequently, you'll have your teaching qualification certificates. You'll maybe also have copies of references, copies of job applications, job offers, continuing professional development certificates or proof, as well as things like cards from pupils, cards from parents, and so on. And we have the equivalent historic documents for some teachers in our personal papers. So for instance, we hold the personal papers of John Strath, who in 1767 applied to teach at Nairn Parochial School. And he supplied a letter of reference signed by numerous people, and this is what it said. It's written as a kind of group reference for John Strath, and it said that being well informed of the sufficiency, good character, conversation and loyalty of Mr. John Strath, late schoolmaster at Ruthven of Badenoch, and of his literature and qualifications to exercise and discharge the duty and function of schoolmaster of the parochial school of Nairn, and to teach and instruct the youth in Latin, English and Greek languages and other necessary branches of education, to the glory of God, the benefit of youth and God of the kingdom. Interesting again there, that kind of group reference signed by lots of people saying that he is not only capable of teaching things like English, Latin and Greek, also reference there to his good character, his loyalty, and again the fact that he can teach to the benefit of God and the glory of the kingdom. Interesting. Although, despite these references that we know existed, we definitely see some questionable teachers getting through. If you may remember from Music, Dance and Drama Week, there are some teachers who you wonder how they got through. We also see this through our court records, so we hold records of people being imprisoned and banished and executed even for crimes, including some school teachers. Hugh MacLeod, the Assynt murderer, and Walter Boston coming to mind immediately. If you want to know more about those, then way back at the beginning, Crime and Punishment Week will tell you the story of Hugh MacLeod. We also hold some diaries and journals written by teachers pre-1872, such as the Journal of James Banks, which is held at Nucleus, the Caithness Archives, from the 1840s. This is another example of exactly what you would expect in a person's diary, a blending of private life and working life. My colleague Anne in Nucleus described the diary to me as very much a religious-based monologue, which makes it feel that James had gone into teaching as a way to escape overbearing parents. She said that reading through his journal made her think that he probably wasn't a very proactive teacher, and he seemed to rely very greatly on prayer, meditation, and calling on the heavens for guidance, rather than anything else. In March 1848, Banks's diary records an incident where he was accused of assaulting and ill-treating a pupil called Donald Smith. He records in detail in his diary the whole event. He describes what had come about, how he had seen the pupil, who he describes as very spoilt by his mother in his father's absence at sea, playing with a penknife and carving a bit of wood into a boat. And it just, as I was reading it, immediately conjured up Just William, which I know I've said several times before about pupils. So he says that he has seen this pupil taking out a penknife, carving this wooden boat, and not listening to what the teacher's telling him. He says he gives the child a chance to give the boat up, but the child refuses. And so he dismisses the class, and he says in his diary he dismisses the class out to the playground so that he can get the child to give up the boat without humiliation in front of the rest of the class. He wants to give him a chance to not lose face, essentially. But eventually, after numerous refusals, he took the wooden boat out of the child's pocket physically and dismissed him. He notes that the child loitered a little while out of sight, and then the next thing we hear is that the teacher has been accused of mistreating the child. So the child goes home. Before he hears a rumour that this is going to happen, so he goes to the mother's house and says, I just want to put my side of the story over first, this is what happened. But he's accused of mistreating the boy when he was alone in the classroom with him, of cutting his nose, ripping his trousers, and he has no witnesses to say whether that's not the case. In a very short time, this is escalated, and he writes in his diary that the church, the people, and even the very children are now against me. He strongly denies any wrongdoing, but he ends up applying to move to teach elsewhere. The pupil in question, incidentally, he notes in his diary a few days or a few weeks later, goes on to cause damage, breaking the wheel of a nearby mill, and he says the child stoutly denies this, and we're told that his parents boldly stand in his defence. So who knows the truth? Certainly teachers administered a fair amount of discipline. Children can be disruptive and difficult in class. So who knows what the truth of that story is? We only have the teacher's side of it. But I thought that it perfectly illustrated the tightrope that teachers had and still have to walk, of maintaining discipline, of being in loco parentis, of needing backup and evidence and witnesses, as well as all the teaching that teachers are doing. There's a huge amount of responsibility on our teachers' shoulders. Once we pass that huge landmark legislation of 1872, the Education Scotland Act, the references to teachers in the collections increase massively, as did the number of teachers who were working. because as education became compulsory for 5 to 13-year-olds, and the Education Act took over, the Board of Education took over new schools, setting up hundreds of new schools and taking over those that already existed. Obviously, there was a huge increase in the number of teachers that were required. And so it's from this day onwards that it becomes easier to find out about a teacher's career, where records survive, as always with archives. But in this particular subject, thousands of records do survive in the county collections. The school boards, at the time of the Education Act, school boards were set up at a regional level that were given the right and duty to appoint teachers. The teachers at this point on needed certificates of competency to teach. If they had already been in post before 1872, they were deemed to already have that certificate of competency. And you can only imagine, I think, what a period of upheaval it must have been, because they're taking over all the existing schools run by the boroughs, run by the churches. They're establishing an entire new national system, a regional system, a local system, building hundreds of new schools, employing hundreds and thousands of new teachers, hundreds and thousands of children who haven't been in education before are suddenly legally obliged to be educated. It's a huge turning point. And so school board minutes, who kind of serve the same, to some extent, are an equivalent to the presbytery in where they sit, that they have several local schools under their control. School board minutes, which had been newly established under this Act, record the details of teachers' appointments. So, for instance, if we look at the Lorna School Board minutes, we can see that a Miss Annie S. Mackenzie was appointed as assistant at Embo for £65 a year on the 26th of July 1912. We can then go from that school board minute book to check into the school logbook, the diary written by the teacher of the school, and we can see that confirmed, but we get a little bit more detail. And this is something I have said repeatedly over the years, that if wherever you possibly can to cross-reference your information, because you just never know where you'll pick up a little bit more in another place that it's been written. Newspapers are classic for that. A newspaper story, you can find the same story, but you'll find a little bit more detail in different ones. So if we go to the school logbook of Embo School in 1912, it says 26th of August 1912, Miss Anne Stewart Mackenzie, so now we've got her middle name, from Dunvegan Primary School, took up duty in the junior division in room of Miss Home. So now we know not only the date she was employed, but the date she started, as well as the fact that she came from Dunvegan in Skye, and the name of another teacher, Miss Home. So you can use the different records across across the county collections to build up a picture. And school board documents will also reveal notable details about a teacher, and things about their details of leaving or retirement and so on. So you can get an idea of a career through these records. Now, the school logbooks are of course written by the teachers, so we do get the teacher's own voice to some extent, because they are writing in a formulaic style. They're writing what they are obliged to write in the school diary. But given that we have over 700 of these across our 4 offices, mostly from the 1870s on to the 1980s, a few earlier, a few later, but mostly that's the period we're talking about, there are inevitably some that have more detail than others. Quite often they'll include basic information about teachers, so they'll frequently say a teacher started today or left today. So for instance, Newlands School in Latheron Parish in Caithness opens on the 15th of September 1873 with the words, "The school reopened under Cameron Mackay, aged 20. So there you're getting some information about a teacher. They sometimes also include a list of staff inside the front cover or inside the diary. And they can really vary according to the kind of loquacity of the teacher. Sometimes the personality is clear. So for instance, in the Bewley Free Church school logbook, where the teacher writes some strongly worded comment about the fact that he's not being paid enough. One of my favourite logbooks across those 700 is the Gersa school logbook from Caithness, held in Nucleus, and it just never stops giving. Every time you open a random page on it, you're just like, oh, That's interesting. So there's all sorts of detail and anecdotes in that logbook. So for instance, January the 9th, 1880, the teacher writes, "Schoolwork was resumed on Monday. On Tuesday the schoolwork was shortened to facilitate attendance at the Magic Lantern entertainment given that night." So Magic Lantern being kind of like a slideshow but with fire lighting them instead. On December the 30th, 1889, at playtime today, a man came into the school playground with an African monkey for the amusement of the scholars. I mean, why there was an African monkey in Caithness in 1889, who knows? But I love that the teacher took the time to write it, because it doesn't affect the running of the school. It's not about attendance, it's not about closures or illness, but he's taken the time to note it in. And that's also the school, you may remember from the Caithness Dialect Week, that's also the school that encouraged the pupils to write a piece of work, first of all in straight English, and then again in local Caithness dialect. So I love that. That is right up there with my favourite logbook entries. The logbooks often contain extracts about teachers undertaking additional training, right through to their most recent school logbooks. So for instance, that Garsa school teacher was one of those who was selected in the 1880s to attend a special course of instruction on the principles of agriculture at Edinburgh University. He went for a month, and as a result of that, he came back and did a very detailed series of lessons for the pupils about dairy products. How do you make cheese? How do you separate curds and whey, and all that sort of thing is in the school logbook in great detail. But school logbooks also reveal teachers having to deal with crisis, both personal and within the school. So this is an extract from that school in Caithness from May 1898. So on the 29th of April, the teacher writes, "The teacher was absent at the funeral of a relative in Wick. John Swanson has been ill and the doctor gives no hope of his getting better. His name has been removed from the register." And then on May the 6th, so a week later, "John Swanson died this morning after 3 weeks' absence from school. This occasioned the absence of his sister and 3 of John MacLeod's children, and a gloom is apparent among all those present." And those references there, one to a relative dying and the teacher needing time off for the funeral. So you can find that kind of family history information within these, where the family life impacts on the job. So they have to be off for a wedding, for a funeral, for a relative's illness, things like that. But also that kind of couple of lines there about the child dying and the impact and the gloom spreading throughout the school. And we have seen that so many times in the news, where a crisis hits a community, it's often the teachers who have to support pupils through something that has a lasting impact on them. We can also see references throughout the school logbooks to discipline, so references to the TAWS, the belt, the strap being used. Here's an extract from Newlands School in Caithness. 9th of July 1875. Sent 2 boys, Donald Gunn and James McGregor, home for their memorandum books which they had forgotten, at least they said so. They didn't return all day. And then a couple of days later, asked Donald Gunn and James McGregor why they did not return on Friday. They said their parents wished them to stay at home. Pardoned them this time, but told them that if they did the like again, I would expel them altogether. So there's no kind of messing about there, not many second chances. That's the same school, incidentally, where the teacher, you may remember me telling the story that the teacher investigated some pupils who were out to slay another of the pupils. That's the word used. Logbooks also give information about pupil teachers, so academically inclined, able senior pupils who were given the role of teaching the younger ones, and they would often go on and become teachers themselves. There's also references in the logbooks to side school teachers, and side schools were often established in large rural areas where not all the children were able to attend the main school. Sometimes just 1 or 2 families would attend the side school, which might be in a small building or a room of somebody's house. And side school teachers may have been paid less and may have taught fewer subjects, but these schools would have been overseen by the main school head teacher. And so you can see references of the main teacher recording in their logbook that they're visiting the side school, and you can see references in the side school saying that they have been visited by the main teacher. If you are interested in side schools, you could go onto our website where we've done our Education Act exhibition, and you'll hear an oral history of some memories of a side school teacher from the 1930s and how she cycled 10 miles each direction every day to get to the side school where she taught a couple of children who were children of a shepherd. I started this episode by saying that I really believe that teachers have a great ability to shape lives and to have a long legacy. And so I wanted to kind of pull this to an end almost by telling you the story of a teacher who's represented in our Skye and Lochalsh collection before finishing up with some great things from Nucleus that had me laughing out loud yesterday. So this is the story of one teacher sent to me by my colleague Catherine in Skye. Flora Nicholson Reid, MBE, of Kylaken Primary School. There's an entry in the Kylaken Primary School logbook on the 2nd of March 1951 which notes that Miss F.N. Reid had been appointed to take charge of the school from the 5th. Flora Reid had been born in 1915. She was the daughter of William Mitchell Reid and Flora Nicholson. She had been educated herself in Kylaken and in Portree before going on to study and get her MA Honours at Glasgow University, after which she returned to teach at the school that she had attended, Kylaken, becoming the head teacher. She was a woman well known and well loved by many, and if you remember her, please do comment. She taught generations of children and again had that ability and that platform to shape lives and shape minds. And in addition, she was dedicated to a wide range of both educational and community causes in the Skye and Lochalsh area. So she was a dedicated supporter of the Isle of Skye Peace Centre, the Skye Labour Party, Amnesty International, UNESCO. She served as secretary and I think chair of the Isle of Skye campaign for nuclear disarmament, as well as leasing, along with her sister Catherine, a property in Kylaken to the West Highland Free Press, the security of which the West Highland Free Press and others now give us a reason for the paper's successful establishment in Skye. Margaret Macpherson, who you may remember I spoke about in a previous Learn with Lorna as another very influential and prominent woman in Skye and Lochalsh, she had this to say about Flora. Flo Reid was a woman of outstanding dignity and coalescence of like-minded activists who made a national humanity. Imagine being remembered as a woman of outstanding dignity. When she died in 1995, she was still standing up strongly for what she believed in. She was opposed to the tolls which were about to be imposed on the newly opening Skye Bridge. She was clearly a woman of strong principles and a belief in the power of education and the power of free speech. And that takes me perfectly to the last couple of things I wanted to share with you. And we might even finish very nearly on time. These are some extracts from our Nucleus collections. First of all, from the Wick High School magazine of 1977, and then the Thurso High School magazine. This one, the first one that I wanted to share with you, is from Wick High School magazine, 1977, and it's entitled Free Speech, which was lovely when I had finished reading about Flora Reid, and then I came on to see this and I was like, free speech. And what I like about this is in the school magazine they have asked the pupils of Wick High School and the rector the same questions to see what their answers are. So for instance, write a few words about drinking. The pupils have said that they are 59% in favour of drinking, although 41% urge moderation. Interesting when you remember that Wick had been dry for many years. 40% of the pupils are against drinking, with 1% saying they have no opinion on it. The rector says Excess drinking is at the root of much misery, especially in the Highlands. Starting drinking at an early age, even in moderation, is so very often the beginning of a slippery path that the risk is not worth taking. Anyway, there are so many better and more interesting things to do with time and money. Another of the questions is there anything in school that is a waste of time? And the pupils have 45% have said religious education, 30% have said social education. And the rector, in answer to the question, is there anything in school that is a waste of time, has said lazy, uninvolved pupils are a waste of time. And I wanted to finish by sharing with you some extracts from the Thurso High School magazine of 1965, and this is the thing that made me laugh out loud and send it round to all my colleagues. The piece in the magazine is entitled Staff Interrogation. Question: what do you do in the staff room? So for each question, various teachers have written their answers. So the first question is, what do you do in the staff room? And here are some of the answers. Depends on the company. Torture first year pupils who have the audacity to point out our spelling mistakes on the blackboard. Admiringly discuss our paragons of virtue and industry. But someone has said in answer to the question, what do you do in the staff room? Escape from the pupils. The next question is, what don't you do in the staff room? And the same person has written, escape from the staff. What do you consider to be the role of the prefects? To walk tall. Okay. What do you suggest would improve the 5th year? One of the teachers has said, changing the school leaving age to 13. What do you suggest would improve the 5th year? 6th year. What do the staff think of having better staff-pupil relationships? Firstly, get better staff, one of the teachers has written. Another one has written, they rarely think, especially not about pupils. Do you think the staff should form its own pop group? If so, who would you choose and what should they be called? The maths department should be called the father figures. Someone has written, I think we should have a staff pop group called the Meekers. I am already a well-established member. Would the staff like to give their views on the proposal of having a portrait gallery of the likenesses of outstanding pupils? And someone has put outstanding pupils? And someone else has said, perhaps chalk portraits by the front door would be most suitable. Would the staff like to play a more active role in the morning assembly? And someone has written, just wait till our pop group gets started. It just made me laugh out loud. So there are some great stories to be found about teachers within our collections. We can use these archives to get all sorts of insights in the subject, whether it's the recruitment of teachers, the interwoven nature of education and religion, the salaries of teachers, the personal abilities of teachers to have an impact on local and community lives. I think I'll do another Learn with Lorna on recollections and reflections of school, because as I was asking particularly my colleagues in Nucleus for some thoughts on this episode, they sent me some really interesting ones of people reflecting on their time at school. So I think I'll set that up as a separate Learn with Lorna where we do memories and reflections of school days, both from the staff and the pupil perspectives. So I hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me. Next week I'll be looking on a focus on the MacLean family of Rassie, and included in that is one very well known and very well loved teacher, Sorley MacLean. So I hope you can join me next week. Please do tell me stories of your teachers. I will pick up on them. But a reminder in the meantime that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. That High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of talks. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then please do so. There's a link in the text whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, and we're very grateful for any support you can give us. Thank you.